Welcome to the first episode of The Exceptional Caregiver's Life, a podcast about families navigating disabilities. With various guests, we will explore various topics that are close to our hearts, giving personal stories, suggestions, frustrations, and successes. Life with a special needs family member is a very challenging journey, but one also full of joy and hope. I'm excited and honored to be your co-host. My name is Wendy Robertson, and I have a 17-year-old daughter who is autistic and intellectually and developmentally disabled. I've been a member of the Family Advisory Council, or FAC, at Surrey Place for numerous years. We share our experiences, advocate, and make recommendations to Surrey Place to improve client care. The FAC is passionate about starting this podcast series so that other caregivers out there know that they are not alone, and hopefully we can all learn from each other's experiences. So I'm now going to turn it over to my amazing co-host to kick things off.
Thanks, Wendy. Hi, I'm Liz Phipps. I'm the mom of Jack, my 20-year-old son with autism and some pretty complex special needs. Jack's diagnosis at 3 years old had a profound impact on my life and led me to a career in not-for-profit, focusing on advocating for those with ASD. I've used my platform to speak publicly at conferences and have been featured on radio, TV, and in print. But enough about us. Today's topic is about community, and I want to welcome our very special guests, Sara Marcelin-Elliott and Linda Koehler. At age 63, Linda was planning to move into the retirement stage of her life when she assumed legal custody of her 6-year-old grandson, Anthony. He was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, developmental delay, and had suffered early trauma. Linda is now a single parent, second time around. Sara is a Toronto-based mom to one very special teen with a dual diagnosis. As a first-time parent, she had to grow radical acceptance while developing her own identity and seeking community. Inspired by the relationships her son developed with his therapist, Sara pursued a career in behavior analysis and found joy working to support others in her son's community. Always keen to continue her learning journey, joining Surrey Place Family Advisory Council has been a wonderful opportunity to continue connecting and expanding her community.
So we wanted to kick it off with talking about the different stages of community and how it's changed throughout your journey. So Linda, do you want to perhaps start us off?
Wow. Well, in the beginning, I just got my grandson when he was 6. He had been diagnosed earlier, but I really knew nothing about the diagnosis, autism. So I think the biggest challenge for me was finding the services and programs and navigating through the whole system, which I'm sure we all can relate to is very complex. And I think the other thing that I had going for me was that I was just starting retirement, so I had time. And I had time, it really took me like 2 years to kind of go through that process of finding the right place, finding the right services, and navigating the system. And linking my grandson to all of the other activities that are in the community.
And how did you find community? We had talked briefly earlier, and you had said you have a great support group around you that has really had your back through this journey.
I do. I'm very fortunate, and these have been really, really strong friends of mine for a long time. They've rallied around. They've helped out with a number of things. So that really has become my sort of made up family in a way, because I don't have any biological family close to me anymore.
Linda, has that changed at all for you? Has the community changed? You mentioned your friends, but has that changed since you've had your grandson, or has the community stayed the way it has been from the beginning?
Well, that's a really good question, because I say I'm still really close with the good friends because they're the ones who stuck around, right? A lot of my peers probably thought I was crazy at the age that I was taking on this situation with my grandson. But I must say that most of my close friends have stuck by me and have really stepped up. So
that's amazing.
I guess in a way it has changed, because Now it's about Anthony and me and not just me. And so people kind of take that extra step to make sure, they are buying him birthday gifts and Christmas gifts and checking in on him and not just me. So in a way, it has evolved, but it's for the best.
Wow. Can I get invited to your coffee group? Because that sounds amazing.
Sure. Anytime.
And Sara, how about you? How have your community changed throughout the years?
Oh my gosh, I'm just listening to Linda and I feel like we are mirroring each other because I had Mello young. I was 21. I turned 22 a couple months after Mello was born. And so that's a pretty radical shift from the lifestyle I was having as a student in fine arts. And I did have some friends who really got involved and stuck around a lot. I had a few friends who fell off just in those early years of motherhood. And then after Mello got diagnosed, some of my young mom friends, they kind of fell off too because our children were walking different paths. And I don't think that they knew how to walk alongside us in that way. But I was very fortunate to have really supportive folks in the service spaces. Maybe because I was a young mom and I had this kid who was newly diagnosed and quite exceptional. People really went out of their way to try and help connect me to services. And so I was quickly connected to Surrey Place and Geneva Center. My developmental pediatrician really tried. And I met some moms there. And that was pretty good for a while when he was in that intensive therapy.
Are those still the people in your community, or how has that changed? How old is your son now, Sara?
Oh, yeah. He is 15. He's going to be 16 in June. So I've been trekking along for a while. I'm aging myself here. But they fell off too, because my son is a really, really special, unique guy, but he also has really, really unique needs. And even within the autism community and the developmental community, I found that we were a little isolated because sometimes we couldn't do the same things that even the families in that community were doing. So we were a little isolated that way. But we were able to find community. My mom, bless her heart, moved from Mexico to Toronto with her twin babies to live with us and to help me and my guy when he was 4. And we actually lived together in a multi-generational home for like a long time until he moved into care, until he moved to residential care when he was 13.
So, what I find really interesting is we talk about who our community is within autism. And one thing, and I don't know if any of you will agree or disagree with this, but I found even within the autism community, it was still hard to find people that had children similar to yours because autism is a spectrum. I would be looking for parents that would have a child similar to my son, Jack, and who, maybe had behaviors and had OCD and did specific things. And I remember going to support groups and you would meet moms and their children would be higher functioning or their children would be nonverbal. So I found within even that autism community, the spectrum was so wide that I didn't even necessarily always find community within the ASD community, but you think you would, right?
Yeah.
Do you agree, Wendy, with that?
Absolutely. I remember being at support group or just play groups or whatnot, and Bridget would be acting up or doing whatever Bridget does. And someone would go, "Oh, have you tried stickers? Have you tried, chicken nuggets?" And I looked at them and I'm like, that is not the stage my daughter is at. So yes, it can get very frustrating. I even find specialists will start to tell you what should be happening with your child. And you're like, you're not listening to me. That isn't where my child is. But anyways, that's a talk for a different day for sure. But I think that's amazing. Wow, your mother is like a saint. She had twins and she moved countries to be with you and support you. Yep. That brings tears to my eyes, to be honest. That is an amazing mom.
Yeah, shout out to my mom. But we helped each other because she had twins and I had my guy. So we would do everything together. My sisters are my son's favorite people.
Nice.
Like he adores them. Things he won't do for us, he'll do for them. He loves being with them. Those are his people, his favorite people. And then we also found like a few places in Toronto that were so accepting. We go to Variety Village for his swimming. Even now that he's in residential care, when he comes for overnights, we still go. And like the adults there in that community will be like, "Where's your guy? We miss him. We love seeing him in the pool. He's so happy." We felt really, really accepted there. There's also a group at the Boys and Girls Club in Scarborough where we felt so accepted, at the Playdates group. So yeah, and then I became a BCBA and made friends with other people who are really passionate about the community. And that's how I got people who will be there for me as a person and support me.
Well, then you've definitely said the pros about the community for sure. How you've developed and changed your community throughout the course of your son's life. But now, you know, there's pros and there's cons. And I'd like to see what your thoughts are on those. Linda?
Well, maybe I could talk a little bit more about the pros that I found as well, outside of my friend circle. And similar to Sara, I've found places as well where we've been accepted and where Anthony loves in the community. And I think I was fortunate because I worked most of my life in the City of Toronto Parks and Recreation and was quite familiar with the programs and the staff there with adapted programs. And Anthony has been to the Parks and Recreation day camps for 3 summers now. And it's a consistent place. It's a familiar place. Of course, there's some staff turnover, but there's always at least 1 or 2 staff that remember him, that welcome him with big smiles. And he just loves it. And he's so comfortable there. And it's been fantastic. The other thing I just wanted to say for pros, community-wise, was the staff at Surrey Place, who helped me a lot in the first 2 years because Anthony had been in care and I needed to access funding for him to get services. And 3 of the therapists from Surrey Place came with me to an advocacy meeting at CAS and were able to explain the importance of Anthony getting the services and that it would have been even better if he got them as a preschooler. And as a result, I did end up getting the funding. So I was embraced there as well. So there are so many different factions of community, right? There's your personal circle, there's the community programs, and then there's how you can link in and find a sense of belonging for yourself and your child through Surrey Place or other organizations that offer the therapies that help our children.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. We're talking about the pros and it's a nice positive conversation. I just want to touch a little bit on the cons of community and what that looks like. So, I recall with my son having, pretty exceptional needs and being accepted into a program. So that would be, a camp or some type of therapy program. School is another great example. And you embrace that. You find people that love your child. He seems to be doing well until things don't go well, right? And when things don't go well, that community can fall apart. And I really, really felt the impact of that. We've had to change schools. We've had to change programs. Things that were promised in a certain program that didn't hold true, we had to leave or we were asked to leave, right? So I think the whole idea of community is good. It can be until a certain point, until it's not good. And then you have to move on, right? You move on and find new ways.
Yeah, it's hard when you think you have your tribe, for example, and then things change. And then you feel hurt and disappointed and let down. But, just want all our listeners to know, like listening to these experiences, is that you will find a new one. Your child will continue to grow. You'll go into a different situation and you'll find some other great people to help. But everybody needs to work together. And Sara, what about you?
I have to say that I have definitely experienced this. My son's older now. When he was little, the face of an angel. Everybody loved to see him coming, even if he was having a hard day. But when he got older and his hard days continued to look the same, the people who thought, look at this sweet angel, had very different reactions. And even sometimes now, my son's in public school. He's in a great supportive classroom. But I've gotten feedback from staff at his home like, hey, I went to pick him up at school today, and the lady who dropped him off, she did not look too happy to be working with him. It's heartbreaking. Sometimes you have really tough moments. And I'm not going to put myself out there in the sense of like really going into it, but I have in every place I've been to had some moments that were really heartbreaking because I feel like I'm trying to fit us into a situation that's actually not beneficial for us at this point.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I really have to reevaluate and like, okay, this hard thing happened. Is it safe for me to go back? Like, can I go back? Are people going to be okay to see us again? And that's why I name dropped some of the places where we felt accepted, because even in those places, we had tough times and everyone would, smile through it and be happy to see us again. So
I think that the whole thing with community is community for the parents and community for the child, right? And those two have to kind of go together. And as the parent, you know better what the right community is and what's working. So I think it has to be sort of that blend of what's working for your child. Are they feeling accepted? Do you feel that as a parent? Because sometimes you can look at a situation, you think your child's okay, but it's not the right thing. And I think that's just the evolution of a community. And I know personally, I've had to experience that and find new members, as Wendy said, new tribe members. But that's okay. 17 years in, I get that. The early days, harder. But later days, you really do figure that out.
I was going to say, even today, I've had people in the past go, oh, well, thank goodness she's cute. But she is now 17 and the cute factor is, significantly gone down. She's a pretty girl, but, when they're cute, even her bus driver today said, this is too much. I'm quitting. I'm 2 more weeks. And it's our 3rd or 4th bus driver this year. So, some people can do it and some people can't. And our kids have bad days and so do I. But it takes a special person to work with our children, and I don't know about you guys. I'm sure it's positive. It's the same. When they're nonverbal and they can't tell you if they've had a good day or a bad day. And so you're relying on whoever the bus driver is or whoever the EA is, and they're having a bad day with your kid, then you really have no idea if it's a good fit or not. I just gauge it as Bridget goes onto the bus smiling. She comes off of the bus smiling. Then I guess it was a good day. But it's really hard. It puts a different level into everything when your child cannot express their feelings.
Linda, what would you change about community? I'm curious for where you're at in your stage of life and with Anthony. What would you like to see out of the community? If we're talking to a broader audience and people who might not have children like ours, what would you like to see from the community that would, enrich your life and your grandson's life?
Well, as I'm listening, I'm thinking a lot about the larger community or the society as a whole, and how we do have to every day face this thing where our kids don't necessarily fit in or they don't do the proper thing when they're on the subway, and how is everybody reacting? And I think about this a lot around, like we go to our local library, and there's programs at every library across Toronto, but there's no programs for him, right? I can't just take him to the regular library story time because he won't sit still and he runs around and he does whatever. So I'm like, I often think about this from a systemic level. What are we doing as a society to be more inclusive? And in the city of Toronto or any municipality where people pay property taxes, shouldn't we all have access to an equal amount of programming and places where our kids can go? So I think about that a lot. I really struggled in the beginning when I had Anthony, because although we have a close-knit neighborhood, Anthony as well was totally nonverbal at that point in time. And so he didn't fit in, and the neighbors didn't know how to react to him. But I'm really happy to say at this point, they've become more sensitive and more accepting, and we've really created a kind of village, but that's just in our little corner of the neighborhood. So, outside in the bigger world, that's where we're always going to struggle, I think, right?
Yeah.
And Sara, do you feel that? How do you feel about what the community could be doing better?
If I could just say one thing, it would be just give people grace and give people a smile and acceptance in your eyes, because there's nothing harder than you're already trying to regulate your emotions, support someone who's having a really challenging moment, and then to have apprehension or judgment or even verbal words being exchanged to you. It really adds an extra layer of difficulty. And so if there was one thing I could say to the wider community, it's give each other grace.
That's great.
People
great.
Adore their children.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And they just want their children and their loved ones to be accepted.
And aren't you all? I get very emotional when people are extra kind, or they see I'm with my son and they pick up on the fact that he is a young man with special needs, and they'll get out of their chair so he can sit down. They will, open a door, just very small acts of kindness. I'm always very overwhelmed by that. I get very emotional. And you know what? I always make a point to say thank you. Thank you for your understanding. Thank you for what you just did. Because I think it's really important to acknowledge when somebody does something kind. We can't take that for granted. I feel like it should be intuitive, but it's not intuitive.
It's not.
In our society.
So agree, Liz. Yeah.
It's also exposure and if now kids growing up now, there are more children like ours with special needs in the broader public system now. So kids are getting used to seeing somebody that might not act the way they do. And so I'm hopeful that the next generation of our children are more accepting, because that's what I hope, because they deserve it.
I feel like they are. I actually really do feel like they are. And I think the school system is really trying, in that whole advocacy piece and the inclusion piece and awareness piece. Listen, we always have a long way to go, but I think by each of us and the community at large doing their part with acceptance, that, we're making some ground. I don't know. Do you feel like that, Linda? Do you feel like there's some headway? And from what, as a grandmother, right? You were a mother at one point. Do you feel between being a mother and a grandmother, you've seen changes in acceptance?
I think I have, because certainly my son had some challenges as well. And I think the whole school system, for instance, was different then. We've been so fortunate. The school that Anthony's at it's a fairly small school. The placement is fantastic. And I was just so, as you would say, Liz, I got so emotional the other day because I walked with Anthony into the school. We were coming after one of his programs, and a bunch of the other kids in a few classes were in the hallway, and about 3 or 4 of them yelled out, "Hi, Anthony. Hi, Anthony." And I just said to the teacher, that's so fantastic. But it's what they've done within the whole school, not just in Anthony's classroom, which is a special needs class, but in the school as a whole, that kids are learning to be more acceptant.
Best Buddies is a great program that's in the schools.
Oh, yes, that's true.
Best Buddies. Bridgie has 2 Best Buddies, and they just get so excited to go and hang out with her. I think that's a great program. I hope they continue to expand it.
Yeah.
And I would be remiss not to mention the siblings. Like, siblings are spreading awareness, and they are so caring and loving, and they're showing that to their peers, and they're really helping other folks see the people that they care for through their eyes and like learn how to interact with folks. And they just do such a tremendous job of caring and showing what it is to care. So I want to shout out especially my little sisters.
Well, also, I think with the holidays approaching, it's making me realize as well what the community, and I wanted, as we're getting close to the end of this podcast, sort of, wrap it up on a positive note. And, some of the things that the community are doing that I don't think we saw in the past, that sensitive Santa, where you can take your child and, it's a quieter atmosphere and no lines and things that might trigger young children with ASD or other exceptionalities. The movie theaters as well, they do, quiet movies where the lighting's dimmer and the sound is turned down. So when I see these pieces of advocacy in the community, I really light up. And I wonder if I'd even notice if I didn't have a child with an exceptionality. But I do have a child with one. And when I see the community moving forward versus moving back, it makes me really happy. And I think, wherever you live, I think your community is probably trying to do things. And if they're not, if there's anything you can ever suggest, in terms of your own advocacy to ask, right? I think we can only make a difference with what we request and, what we put forward.
I think that's a great point. Sara, do you have anything you want to end with?
I was just thinking, maybe other families in other areas will have their own family advisory councils to try and enact some of these things that Liz was talking about. And it's just such a pleasure to be part of the fact and to be able to have conversations like this with wonderful caregivers like you guys.
Thank you. Linda?
Well, I think it's really important that we're doing these podcasts. It's important for us to talk about our own lived experience, to share with everybody. I'm thinking in the back of my head that I have a friend who does a lot of work in Brazil, and we've been talking a lot about him. He's connected with a lot of families there whose kids have autism and they don't have the same kinds of services and supports. And we've been talking about things like maybe taking some of these podcasts and translating them so that parents there can learn about, without the services, how can you support your child through community, through, extending with friends and family and groups and support groups and those kinds of things. So I think it's really a great thing that we're doing these podcasts.
Well, thank you, Linda. And thank you, Linda and Sara, for joining us today. You've been great guests. So I want to thank all our listeners for listening to our first ever podcast of The Exceptional Caregiver's Life. I'm Wendy Robertson.
And I'm Liz Phipps. This podcast was made possible by Surrey Place and the Family Advisory Council. Special thanks to lead podcasting team for the production support, and to Abe Valesco, who has been instrumental in getting this podcast to fruition.
If you want to learn more about this topic or about Surrey Place and the FAC, please visit www.surreyplace.ca/podcasts. Be sure to sign up for the Surrey Place newsletter by scrolling to the bottom of the main Surrey Place page and subscribing.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please write us a review and subscribe to the podcast to stay up to date. We hope you can share this with someone who might enjoy it. Bye for now.